Hi, welcome to The Witch in the Woods. I was asked a while ago, I think I've been asked a couple of times now, if I can do a book review. And the problem with that is that I had a bit of a fad of downsizing. And I moved into a van. I had something like 11 boxes of books. And I actually downsized and sold them all in Glastonbury, where I got a very good price for them and made an absolute fortune, and sold them all for second-hand books. So really I regretted it quite a lot to get rid of so many books, and I'm slowly building up my bookshelf again. But what I thought I would do instead is give you my reading pile, which are books that I bought recently. I've had a bit of a binge last week, a couple of weeks ago, and I spent £100 on books, which I've been wanting to do for quite some time, which means that I'm dying to read these new books, but when I read them they'll get all tatty. So I've not read them yet, which is why I'm hurrying along making this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bit of a look at my book haul, and mention a couple of books that I've already read but are fairly new. So mainly these are on the subjects of Sadir and witchcraft and Saxon magic, and so I will sort of give you a little look at my new witchy haul. Just gather up the last few books. You photobombing again? You are. You're going to have to get higher up if you want to be on the video. I think the lighting is absolutely appalling actually. I'll change this lighting a little. Hi, I'm in the dark. Oh, that's okay. I'm kind of focusing in the dark there, hopefully. Come on, focus. Don't lean forward, it really confuses the whole issue. It's a shame I can't fill my bookshelf, which is now a bit empty. Okay, so first I'm going to cover a couple of books that I have read recently, and I would recommend this book, which is fairly new to me. I've mentioned it before, Witchcraft and Secret Societies of Rural England, and this is quite nice as a factual history of cunning folk and cunning folk practices. It covers a lot of the secret guilds of England and some of their rites and some of their secret funny old practices, and how these were actually related to traditional witchcraft. It's very interesting. It's a factual read. It won't give you practical witchcraft 101 advice, but if you want some background into witchcraft, then I would definitely go for some recordings of traditional witchcraft. So I would include this, and I would include the other one that I read recently, which is Traditional Witchcraft, A Cornish Book of Ways, by Gemma Gary, and this is Troy Books. Now I totally like Troy Books. They have a beautiful selection of books. You can get sort of special edition copies that are absolutely gorgeous, lovely fairy bound elven grimoires. I don't know how easy these are to get if you're living abroad. I have the same problem trying to get some things here that we can't get as easily over here, so let me know if you can get Troy Books abroad. But this, again, it's slightly specific to location, and a lot of these witchcraft societies are Cornwall and Devon, Cornish and Welsh and things like that, because they have a longer and better recorded history, and I think perhaps more documentation of actual witchcraft societies, witchcraft practices. Of course, we've got the Museum of Witchcraft down there, and that has a lot of interesting little bits of paraphernalia and some witchcraft lore. So there is a lot written on Cornish witchcraft and Welsh witchcraft. Excuse the lighting, it's very, very bright, so I'm probably going in and out of focus there. So I loved this book. I really found this a feast of dipping your toe into some beautiful old cottage on the edge of the wilds, and meeting a proper old traditional witch. So yeah, if you want a whole immersive experience into traditional witchcraft, then I would choose this book. It also has some practical advice, some exercises to do, and some tools to make and things like that. So you would get a lot from this book, I think, if you were to buy it. That's my cat trying to open a door. The door is open, he's just being annoying. So next, I'll go here. So this was another book that I read recently. The sunshine is very bright. Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horne. Again, a very practical guide. It's quite sort of easy to read. You can read it in a day. It's just got some practical examples and some exercises, some traditional lore, very interesting, not the kind of thing you would find in your everyday Wicca book. So I found that very interesting. Now, I went and bought that twice because I bought the updated version, not realising it was the same book. So this has a little bit more in it, which I've not yet got round to reading. But if you're going to look for this book, look for the updated version with more information. It has a ritualistic energy to this book. It's dipping into deep traditional witchcraft, talking about the devil, talking about, not your fluffy Wicca. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, at least from a factual and research basis, then I would recommend this book. This is another book that I really enjoyed reading, and this was Jenny Blaine, who is a good author if you want to know more about Asatru and Heathenry. She's a British author, and she's done a lot of research into the subject, so her books aren't fanciful invention. They are based on factual knowledge, what we know about the subject. And this book was Wights and Ancestors. I really loved it. It's a lovely little read, yet again. Quite easy to pick this book up because some of Jenny Blaine's books are a little expensive. So if you want to look into Asatru and Heathenism, and you want a basic background with a lot of research, then you couldn't do worse than buy Jenny Blaine. I also bought, which is on the bottom of my books here, this Katie Gerard Sadir book. I also enjoyed reading this, but this is a little bit more inventive. There is a basic chapter on factual information, very interesting to read, and then at the end of each chapter there's a path-working sort of practical exercise. Now, I didn't get a lot out of the practical exercises. I just read through them, found them a little boring, haven't tried any. Maybe that's my state of mind. I didn't want to. That squeak was my cat. Big. I'm trying to do something. So I didn't really find these something that I wanted to practice. I felt that personally I would like to find my own path, I think. Although I can definitely take her work and her suggestions as groundwork. Don't take them as read, just they are modern inventions, like a lot of Sadia work is now a modern invention. Personally, where I'm coming from, I wanted to know more of the background and history so that I can work out the factual elements from the New Age fluff. Fluff, come here. Oh, no. Hang on a minute, darling. Having said that, it is a very interesting scope on Sadia. I did enjoy reading it. There's a lot of factual information. It's a year ago since I read this, so it talks about the dead and the soul, the seer in Helheim, how you bring the seer back, the divination cloak. So it's all based on factual stuff. It's got some background on Diana Paxson and Hrafnar, and creating your own rites. So how to work with Sadia magic. If you're looking for a guideline, then this is a good book to read. Meow. Okay, sorry about the cat interruption. And the sun is creeping round, so where else am I? I've got another couple of books to show here. No, can't find them. I've got such a pile. Oh yeah, okay, so mentioning another couple of books on heathenism. This is one I read recently. Good old Edred Thorson, who is also known as My Mind Has Gone Blank. Yes, he's got a couple of names, hasn't he? I'll write that there. Yeah, so he's the expert really on all kinds of rune magic and Geldercraft, and I remember I actually got into the runes at the age of 20 by reading his book on runes, and he was the first person who got me into this mindset of exploring heathenism, heathenry. So he's definitely coming from a basis of magic. It's got some very interesting practical examples, exercises, diagrams, rune staves. So he is definitely a good author if you're interested in researching magical rune staves. This is also a little while since I've read this book, Rune Casting and Meaning of Runes. So this is really a magical grimoire of rune magic. Some of the rituals and a greater understanding really of the heathen path and the heathen cosmology. So I do recommend Edred Thorson, Stephen Flowers, and any book by him is usually quite good. So Northern Magic, as you can see when I've read them, they get a little bit dirtier with coffee stains on, so I'm holding off reading my new books till I've shown you. Then the other new book I've bought, which I've not read yet, is Jenny Blaine, 9 Worlds of Saber Magic. Now this cost me a lot of money, and I have got a few books here that are quite expensive, so if you can't afford, I think it was £30 to buy this book, and it is a slim volume, so quite hard to get hold of, unfortunately, but if you can't afford it, then I think this is a definite must on your bookshelf. That's the way I felt about this precious, precious book. I have to read it because it's so highly acclaimed, really. So, as I say again, Jenny Blaine comes from a factual research kind of stance. She doesn't just make up stuff, she gives you the background and what we know and what we can surmise from the little information we have. It says, written by someone who is also a practitioner as well as a scholar. This is a unique exploration, of what northern shamans do and how they speak of the spirits they meet. My bookmark is in the contents. That's how far I got. So it covers seeresses as shamanic practitioners, the way of the weird and the Norns, journeying, re-evaluating the witch queen, Urgi, Seidmen and queer transformations, and the dance of the ancestors. So they're the chapter headings. And as I say, I haven't read this yet, but if you're a serious scholar, then I would say that you want a Jenny Blaine, especially if you're in England, because I think they're probably easier to get hold of. You do want a Jenny Blaine on your bookshelf. So I would recommend her as a writer. As I say, you can find some cheaper books. This is a nice book too. This was also published by a small British publisher, so depends if you can get hold of it. Now then, moving on. Another new book, which is a book that I replaced and is a must for any person interested in Celtic magic, is The Mabinogion. Now, I like this copy actually. This is a beautiful copy. I had a Charlotte Guest copy, I think it was, many years ago. It's actually got a coffee stain on. That's terrible. Wipe that off. So I haven't read this, but I remember it well, and it's the mystery stories of the Druids and the Welsh civilization. And you probably know that anyway, but I think everyone should have a copy of the Mabinogion. It goes a lot into discussion of Celtic gods, Celtic underworld, Celtic mythology. So getting on to fairy lore, I actually bought this as an accompaniment to this, and this is one of my favourite books, and it's by Caitlin Matthews, and it's Mabon and the Mysteries of Britain. So I would say it's very furry. I would say if you want to study Celtic mysteries, get these two books, because this book explains an awful lot of what's going on in the Celtic stories. This is a very old book now. I've had this years. I've read it many times. I like to dip into it if I want to have a look at some of the mythology. Look at that beautiful old yellow paged kind of copy of a book. Probably smells a bit funny as well. What can I say about this book? It has a paragraph relating to each of the paragraphs of the Mabinogion, and it goes into depth and discussion about what the meaning of this particular area of the story discusses and involves in a deeper level, and it gives you a lot of insight into the Mabinogion. So yep, Caitlin Matthews has done a really good job there, and I would recommend getting those two for research. Now when we're talking of fairy lore, this is another book that I replaced, that I used to have and now replaced with a new copy. And this is The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fairies and Fauns by Robert Kirk. Now Robert Kirk was a 18th century, maybe even earlier, no, probably 18th century cleric in Scotland, and a lot of what he collected was local Scottish fairy lore, and it's the fairy lore of the peasants. So it's written as a factual Hitchhiker's Guide to Fairies, really. And it discusses seeing fairies at funeral banquets, seeing fairies at fairy mounds, accounts of being taken into fairyland, accounts of receiving healing gifts by the fairies, and so I would say that this is also a must if you want to know about Celtic fairy lore. Now then, that's just reminded me of a book that I didn't get. Sorry, this is a quick overview of everything because I have got a lot of books to get through and I've gone through 20 minutes already. So, I've forgotten that I bought this. And this is another book that I replaced. And this is the only copy of an R.J. Stewart book that I've got now. Celtic Myths and Celtic Legends. And these are also the magical legends of the Celts, Tamlin, some lovely illustrations. Oh God, the light is terrible. Beautifully illustrated, which is why I've replaced this one. The rest I carry up here, to be honest. When I sold a lot of my books, I already decided that I had digested them. I knew the basics. The Web of Weird's another one I'd like to replace, which was Brian Bates, was it? Which is, yeah, that's another one I'd like to replace. Any R.J. Stewart book, The Living World of Fairy, are great for practical exercises and information of working with fae folk in a shamanic way. This is beautiful because it has a lot of very important fairy stories that are initiatory, that are the stories that the bards would tell, the stories that are magical in themselves, that give you a greater understanding of Celtic lore, the wooing of a Tane, and there's a little bit of a description and then a retelling by a Celtic bard, basically, is what R.J. Stewart is. So this, along with my fairy lore, has also been replaced. I bought this lovely little book, which is The Way into Fairy by Ray Beth. I found that a lovely little gentle read. It's not got as much as the Hedgewitch books have, more, it's chocker with spells, the Hedgewitch books. I totally enjoy reading them. The only one I haven't got is the first Hedgewitch book, and I sold that. I replaced it and I sold it again, and I will replace it again one day. It just goes to show me that good books want to be back on your shelf. I do regret that. My favourite of the Ray Beth books is, I can't get it. This one. I liked that one. That's got some nice useful spells in it. A guide to healing our lives, so there is a good emphasis on healing your wounds, healing your traumas, things like that in that book. So I like this book. I thought I had them all, but there are a few that I've got to catch up on, so I bought this to catch up. This is a discussion of fairy lore, which is quite nice. I will put that along with the Elves, Fairies and Fauns book, talking about the ancestors, talking about the cunning folk, fairy types and purposes. Where else are we? Oh, that's a long chapter. On being fae. So I'll read a quick list of the contents. Unbeing Fae, various portals, mapping the other world, fairy types and purposes, the light is terrible. Focus over here. Ooh, that little magic. There we go. Mrs. Eldridge Goes to Work, excerpts from a Fae Life, The Ancestors, The Fairy Funeral, Back and Forth Between the World, and Mrs. Eldridge Reflects. So that is a grimoire as if written by a cunning woman, kind of, from what I remember. Now then, I had an order to this, and I was going to mention things in order with other things, but I will just mention them now because I meant to mention them in relation to Sadio work and to heathenry and Northern European shamanism. Now I'm going to talk about Northern European shamanism by referring entirely to Siberian shamanism by Sarangarel. But if you want books on shamanism, these two books will give you some great background into the traditional shamanic practices that were undoubtedly passed along to the Northern Europeans by the Siberians. I think there's no doubt about that in my mind. So this is the basic lore that will teach you about shamanic practice, shamanic clothing, shamanic rituals, some shamanic world views. And they go in the order of riding wind horses and then Chosen by the Spirits. Now I read Chosen by the Spirits first, and this comes recommended as the best book to read. It is a wonderful introduction to using divination, mysteries of Buryat shamanism, the journey, finding your companions, ritual clothing, ritual ubos, and some lovely photographs. She is a shamanic practitioner herself, now sadly deceased, but this is first-hand knowledge from a Siberian shamanism in a readily acceptable form. The book Riding Wind Horses is my new book that I'm yet to read again. It's another one on my pile. This is the first book, and it goes into how the shaman works in the community. I'll give you a quick read of the back. So, in traditional Mongolian Buryat culture, shamans play an important role in maintaining the tagsh, the balance of the community. They counsel a path of moderation in one's actions and reverence for the natural world, which they view as mother to humanity. Mongolians believe that if natural resources are taken without thanking for the spirits, then they resources will not be replaced. So, unlike modern cultures whose shamanic traditions were undermined by modern civilization, shamans in the remote areas of southern Siberia and Mongolia are still the guardians of the environment and the community and the natural order. So I am going to recommend these two books on shamanism they are not new age made up guides of shamanism. They are practical guides, easy to access for the Westerner, but written by a practicing Siberian Buryat shaman. And reading this, I would say, gives you an insight into all sorts of levels of spirituality, because we all read off the same page when it comes to the spirits. So work with these books. If you can only afford one, go for Chosen by the Spirits. My pile's getting larger and larger. Shut up! So, this is also a book that I've bought, and this is Mircea Eliad's Shamanism. It's a must on any shelf. I haven't read it yet. I bought a second-hand copy because yet again it's a book that's now quite expensive to get hold of. I do believe that everybody has to read Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy as well. So that's also on that pile of Shamanism. Another 2 books that I have yet to read. There's quite a lot. I need to spend some time. I've got some books on fairy tales. And this is for me the interpretation of fairy tales, shadow and evil in fairy tales. These are both Shambhala, written by Marie-Louise von Franz. But these give us insights into a lot of folklore. So books like this, books on insight into the story of Baba Yaga, the fairy lore, the fairy tales, I think these are valuable resources too. So the more you can learn about fairy tales, the better. The more you can look deeper into what fairy tales actually mean, what they mean to you, what healing and message they're conveying to you, the better. So I find books like this thoroughly interesting. The one that is also needing replacing, that is the best book out there as far as fairy tales go, is Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. I don't have a copy. I've had it twice. I've read it a couple of times. It's one of those books that I sell on again, knowing that when the time is right, I guess I'll pick up another copy. So that is also stored in my mind quite a lot. I remember a lot of the, not all of it, but the things that meant something to me. So books on fairy tales cover this. This is a wealth of knowledge that we dismiss as little stories for children, and it shouldn't really be that way. Hurrying on because this video is getting long, these are some of my new books. These came last week. So I have Saxon Sorcery and Magic, Weirdworking, Runecraft, Divination and Walk Cunning by Alaric Albertson. Excuse me if I didn't say that right. Now this is a practical guide of Saxon magic, published by Llewellyn, I think. Yep. He's an American writer, so quite readily available everywhere. And he, let me remind myself what's in this book. I've actually read quite a lot in there. So it was a very easy read because I've dived into this quite deeply. Interesting, it talks about Saxon mythology, tools for a magical practitioner, various aspects of the soul body. Now this is why I was enjoying reading this. So various aspects of the spiritual and the soul body, which are, I'll cover briefly, the lick, which is the physical body, the haiga, which is conscious thought, the willa, which is willpower, the wad, which is inspiration, the mod, which is self-identity, the magen, which is the spiritual strength, the hammer, which is the astral body, the mine, which is memory and emotion, the fetch, which is the guardian spirit. And that's as far as I read, and then we're going into the tools of the trade. So this is a user-friendly guide to understanding magic in the terms that our ancestors would understand it, the worldview that our ancestors understood, coming from an Anglo-Saxon, Saxon understanding, which, as I often say, is a knowledge that was pre-Snorri Sturluson by 300 years. So I would say closer to the original heathenry than some of the later, although much more recorded, Viking sagas and things like that. So I hope I've not offended anyone there. So he goes into the Anglo-Saxon runes, and I think the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, the runes of Britain, alchemy, magic, a bit of fairy lore, a bit of herb lore. That one's a good read, and I've read that quite quickly. Yeah, I've quite enjoyed getting into this. I want to carry on, but I don't want to tatter you the book before I show it you, so I made this video now, I can read them. Another new book that I bought was The Witch's Way in the Welsh Borders. This is an ethnography of contemporary and historical customs of cunning folk magic. It's by Earhart Publishing, and it's by Tamsin Powell. And this is based on accounts of, now I've forgotten her name, the member, she was a head member of the Folklore Society in Britain around about the end of the 19th into the early 20th century, and it covers collections of folklores not previously published on cunning folk practices in Wales. So books like this tell you of how traditional witches and traditional cunning folk actually perform magic and spells. I'm moving beyond the basic Witchcraft 101 Wicca phase. I think I've read The Wheel of the Year so many times. I've heard it called reinventing the wheel. You've read it once, you've read it 100 times. You don't always gain a lot of new stuff when you read witchcraft books, especially if you're no longer, I've been reading them for 30 years now, you know, so I'd like to know a little bit more about the traditional witchcraft, the cunning folk, and old folklore stories, because I find them fascinating. So this is another new book of mine, and I would recommend. There's a lot of traditional witchcraft of particular counties out there, so maybe you can find something local to your area as well if you look. Now then, I mentioned the Traditional Witchcraft Troy book by Gemma Gary. This is another Troy book. Everyone recommends this highly. I haven't read it. Aidan Watcher's 6 Ways, Approaches and Entries for Practical Magic. Now I've had a flick through this, and it is another beginner's guide, but it's a beginner's guide in a traditional witchcraft fashion. So it gives you the basics of what the 6 directions, how to open a circle, entering into power, craft tools, things like that, but from a traditional witchcraft stance. Some practical skills: petitioning, sigils, servitors, sigils, I would say sigils, sigils, servitors and spirits, candle magic, things like that. It's quite a quick read, I would imagine. It's probably got quite a lot of practical information. As I say, anything by Troy Books I would recommend, and this is my new one, which I maybe should have read before I review, but it's just a witch haul video, so yeah, look at this one, I got this. Yeah. Okay, but look at this one, I got this one too. Now then, this one is quite hard to get hold of in Britain. This one I got on Amazon, and it went into my basket at a 40 quid mark. And next look in my basket, and the seller had knocked it down 20 quid. So I actually got this book at 21 quid. So I don't know if the seller had seen it was in my basket and decided to take 20 quid off and make a sale. But this is often advertised as £40 book. And it came, I think it came from Sweden. Or somewhere, maybe America. And it is the Trolldom, Spells and Methods of Norse Folk Magic Tradition. So in here it's written by a traditional troll cunninger, a trollman, Johannes Bjorn Garbeck, and it's a collection of spells and magical workings of the Norse cunning folk, the Norse healers, Yet again, it's not your Wicca 101. It tells you how to... It tells you a whole collection of traditional workings, so you may not want to use them. Things like, I'll just read one. A herb for the arm for fertility. Bite the seeds of Hastacera cruscapa yellow dot rumex crispus on the left arm of a barren woman, and she will become fertile, which is some folklore from Sweden from the 18th century and Denmark. And so it's a very fascinating collection of ancient lore that I would recommend if you're interested in researching the background, to actually be a guide to practical magic. I think that's up to the practitioner. I think there's more to it than just reading 5 lines of a spell, but if you want to get a flavour of how this troll working was done, then read the book. If you want the actual guidance, then go take his training course, because he will teach you the art of trolldom. But I'm looking forward to reading this as an introduction to what this guy knows and what this guy can do. So, as I say, it was an expensive bit of a binge at £40. I was lucky in that it got reduced to £21 and I grabbed it. So yeah, very glad that this is now in my prized collection of look at what it got. It got this. My last book, and at the end. This is also an expensive haul. This one was £31. And another renowned expert in his field, Stephen Pollington, and this is a lovely thick book, factual information, well researched information, no hoopy whoopy googar here. This is about what we actually know of the other world of early Anglo-Saxon England, and it's based on evidence, pre-Christian beliefs, attitudes drawn and attitudes to the other world, drawn from archaeology, linguistics, literary studies and comparative mythology. I totally failed to sound intellectual there. The rich and varied English tradition influenced by the worldview of the later medieval and Norse societies. So aspects of this tradition are still with us in the 21st century. So it covers the Anglo-Saxons, the Scandinavian arrival, and I presume some of the Danelaw and the Danish kingdoms in here too. So I'm not bending this book any more than I've already done to show you, but it is quite a thick tome. There's a lot of factual information in there. It's worth the £30, I would say, if you're interested in the subject. It's got lots of nice photographs, lots of diagrams, and an enormous amount of discussion into factual research into heathen mythology and history. So that's it. It was a very long video, but I have got an enormous reading pile here, and I've spent a fortune, and I really should do a lot more research for future videos. So when I've read them, I'll probably bring to you some information about what they contain. So thank you for listening. If you've got any books you'd recommend, I love book collections. Please tell me what you would put in your prized book collection. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, further questions, I will try and answer them about these books. But other than that, I thought I would do a book review, but it's more of a book haul, sadly. So in between that, there's some I've read, some I've mentioned, and some I haven't. I've probably gone on far too long. So thank you for listening, and yeah, cheers if you're still here. I hope to speak to you all again soon. Bye. There's more. Wait. I'm going to review these books. Because, you know, how could I not mention these two? Celtic Fairy Shamanism by Catherine James, Couple Band Publishing. Catherine is a beautiful Celtic seer of the Welsh tradition and taught me everything I know. So these two books and the Doorways to the Other World, which is over there, recommend them. Lovely introductions to Celtic fairy lore and the other worlds. If you want more information, just buy them. They're very good. Okay, I am totally done. I'm totally finished. I mean, I could talk about a few more, to be honest, but I think I covered everything. Yeah, I've covered everything now. Oh God, I can't carry anymore. Just really look at the size of this pile. I just put this so you can see them. I'm not saying that I should sit on my bum for a lot of my life, but really, I've got a tall order here. Oh, I love them. Most of my reading list. Oh yeah, look at that. I am so intellectually weighty. Oh my God. I had worked my muscles quite well as well. That's pretty good. Oh yeah, I feel fit already.